Pulling blocks, deadlift blocks, whatever you want to call them, this is going to be a very straightforward, simple DIY project. Why would you want pulling blocks in the first place? Well, you got a couple options. One, you can do deficit deadlifts, so these give you something that you can stand on. Number two, you can do block pulls from various heights, whether you're doing it to overload the movement or because someone's got to pull from a higher position due to a back tweak. And if you don't have the option for a rack pull or you just rather do block pulls, then this gives you a really solid option. Number three, you've got the option to use these as blocks for people to put their feet on if you're benching. So if you're shorter or if you experience some low back discomfort when you're benching, then getting your feet up on something is a real good option. Bumper plates work well, but if you don't have bumper plates, this is a real simple solution. And a fourth option is you can use these as pulling blocks for snatches and cleans as well. A quick warning about that, they will tend to be a little bit on the bouncy side because these are obviously made entirely of rubber. So let's get to it. We'll link to all of the materials that we use below. We'll provide some links to some of them if you want to purchase them online, but quite frankly, you can get all of these products locally at your local hardware store like an Ace or a Home Depot or a Lowe's, and you can get rubber horse stall mats at places like Tractor Supply. The first thing you're going to need is your standard 4x6, 4 foot by 6 foot by 3/4 inch thick horse stall mat. Now, a couple years ago, we made several pairs of these. We used 2 horse stall mats, and that got us 2 3-inch blocks, 2 1.5-inch tall blocks, and then 4 separate pieces, kind of 4 leftover pieces that are each 3/4 of an inch thick. This time around, I just needed to make another pair of 1.5-inch blocks. We have enough people using them in various places around the gym. It got a little bit old, kind of dragging them back and forth. So I'm just using one mat here, just making one pair of blocks, but you'll see how this can easily apply to making taller blocks as well. You're going to take your mat, you're going to divide it up into 8 identical pieces. I really only need 4 pieces since I'm just making 2 1.5-inch thick blocks, but you'll see how this works for 8 pieces as well. Going along the long side of the mat, you're going to divide it into 4 individual lengths. So that's going to be 1.5 feet wide each because you've got a total distance of 6 feet there. Measuring across the short end of the mat, you're just going to divide that in half. So it's going to be 2 feet wide because you've got a 4-foot wide mat in that direction. You're going to mark some lines. The easiest way to do this is probably with a chalk line, but if you've got a straight edge and a Sharpie, something like a silver Sharpie works quite well. Then it's time to cut the mats. The best way, easily the best way, is to use a jigsaw to do this. Get it up on something so you're not going to run your jigsaw into the ground. I just happen to have some large tires around. I used a couple card tables, but there's a number of ways that you can do this. You just want to make sure that both sides of the mat are supported, because if they're not, you're going to get a lot of vibration and that jigsaw is not going to go anywhere. And then of course leave a gap in the middle for the jigsaw to go through. I do not recommend using a utility knife. You can do it that way. I've done it that way in the past. I've cut a whole lot of rubber mats in the past that way, and I do not recommend it. It takes a long time. Yes, it'll work. You can put the rubber mat up on something so the rubber mat kind of bends downward, and then you can cut it with a utility knife. You can use water. You can use soapy water. All of those methods work, but once you've used a jigsaw, you will never, ever go back and do that way again. So if you don't have a jigsaw, go borrow one from somebody. It's easily the best, the quickest way to do it. After you've cut the mat, now it's time to glue them. Remember, I'm just making 2 1.5-inch thick blocks. If you were going to make 3-inch thick blocks, you would need 4 layers of mat per block. I only need 2 layers of mat per block. So go ahead and apply the glue. I'm just using Gorilla Glue. There's probably a number of adhesives that would work pretty well here. They're going to be screwed together anyway, so it's probably not that big of a deal what type of adhesive you're using. We're probably going with a little bit of overkill here, but just go ahead and spread the glue on the mat and then put the other layer on top. Or if you're doing a 3-inch block, you're going to have to put 3 more layers on top, obviously applying glue between each layer. After gluing the mats together, you're going to drill a 1/4 inch hole in each corner of your stack of mats. After that, in each of those holes, you're going to need 3 pieces of hardware. You're going to take a 1/4 inch thick machine screw, 1/4 inch in diameter. You're going to take a 1/4 inch washer, and then you're going to take a 1/4 inch T-nut. The advantage of the T-nut, it's going to bite into the underside of the rubber so that you can make this thing flush, so you're not going to have anything sticking out at the bottom. The machine screw, the length of the machine screw is simply going to depend on the size of the block that you're making. So I'm making 1.5 inch thick blocks here, so I have a 1.5 inch machine screw. Obviously, if you're making 3-inch thick blocks, then you're going to grab a 3-inch machine screw. You'll go ahead and feed the machine screw through the washer, then you're going to feed it through the hole, and then you're going to thread it into the T-nut on the other side. After that, go ahead and use a driver to tighten things up. It'll nicely kind of embed that T-nut into the mat, and you should have both the screw on the top and the washer, as well as the T-nut on the bottom, pretty nice and flush to the surface of the rubber. At least it'll be very, very close. And that is pretty much the entire project. You can of course label them so you know their thicknesses, especially if you have other people using them. That can be a very handy thing, but that's really the entire project. So hopefully this helps you get stronger and live better.